I never imagined that moving into Sunnyside Estates would turn me into the unwilling main character of a full-blown suburban nightmare. On the surface, the neighborhood was flawless. Perfectly trimmed lawns, tasteful homes, and a sparkling community pool soaking up the California sun. What the realtor forgot to mention was that the entire place was run like a dictatorship by the HOA president, Patricia Winters. Everyone else just called her Karen, and she earned that nickname fast. My first encounter with her came just 3 days after I moved in. I opened my front door to find her standing there, clutching a measuring tape and a dog-eared copy of the HOA bylaws like sacred scripture. Her bottle blonde hair was cut into that sharp, angular bob, and her lips were permanently pinched in disapproval. "Your mailbox is 2.5 inches taller than regulation," she announced flatly, without introducing herself. HOA guidelines clearly state all mailboxes must be between 24 and 26 inches. Yours is 28.5. She delivered the news with the seriousness of a doctor announcing a terminal diagnosis. I blinked, genuinely stunned. "I'm sorry, and you are?" "Patricia Winters." "HOA president," she replied, flashing a tight smile that never reached her eyes. "You'll need to replace the mailbox by Friday or you'll be fined $50 per day." I wanted to argue, but I decided this wasn't the hill to die on. "I'll take care of it," I said, forcing a polite tone. I had no idea that moment was just the opening shot in a long, exhausting war. Over the next few months, Karen found endless violations on my property. Grass half an inch too tall. Trash cans visible more than 12 hours after pickup. A bird feeder that supposedly encouraged undesirable wildlife. Each violation came with a notice. Each notice came with a fine. And every interaction left me more baffled by her obsessive need to control my life. What made it worse was how selectively the rules were enforced. Her friends on the HOA board were apparently immune to citations, while anyone who dared challenge her authority was suddenly under constant surveillance. So I started fighting back. Quietly, I documented everything. Photos of board members' violations that were ignored, copies of every fine I received, audio recordings of our interactions. If I was going to survive Sunnyside Estates, I needed receipts. Things really escalated when I decided to repaint my house. The color I chose, a soft blue-gray, was clearly listed on the HOA's approved palette. I had the paperwork signed by the architectural committee, which Karen conveniently wasn't part of. I even scheduled the painters for a Tuesday, knowing she had her standing hair appointment. I should have known better. When I got home from work, I found the painting crew packing up, visibly uncomfortable. Karen stood in my driveway, arms crossed, wearing that familiar expression of righteous outrage. "I've stopped this unauthorized modification," she declared. "This color was not approved." I kept my voice calm, even though my blood was boiling. "Actually, it was approved. I have the signed paperwork." I pulled the documents from my briefcase. Karen snatched them out of my hand, her manicured nails nearly ripping the paper. "These signatures aren't valid," she snapped. "As HOA president, I have final say on all exterior changes." "That's not what the bylaws say," I replied evenly. "The architectural committee has authority to approve colors from the official palette. Section 4, paragraph 3. I'd done my homework. Her face flushed a deep, angry red. "Well, I'm overriding their decision. This blue is too blue." I exhaled slowly. "The painters are already halfway done. Stopping now will cost me extra, and I'll be billing the HOA for unauthorized interference." Her voice shot up an octave. "You wouldn't dare." "I absolutely would," I said calmly, and I recorded this entire conversation. I tapped my phone in my shirt pocket. Her eyes widened. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Without another word, she spun on her heel and stormed off, her stiff posture barely containing her rage. The painters returned the next day, and my house officially became too blue. I thought I'd won a small victory. I was wrong. Karen's retaliation was swift and creative. Suddenly, my guests' cars were being towed from the street, while other residents' visitors parked freely. My legally protected solar panel requests vanished into paperwork limbo. My trash cans began disappearing, only to be found dumped in the community park with my address painted in bold letters. Through it all, I stayed calm. I documented every petty move and kept building my case. That's when other neighbors started reaching out, sharing their own Karen horror stories. Slowly, a resistance formed. HOA meetings that were once empty became packed. We questioned expenses, challenged selective enforcement, and recorded everything. Karen was clearly rattled, but she still controlled most of the board. Then came the brutal heat wave. Temperatures climbed past 100 degrees for 5 straight days, and the elderly residents were hit the hardest. My next-door neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, an 87-year-old widow, had her air conditioning fail on the second day, and that's when everything changed. The repair company told us they couldn't come out until the following week. Demand was overwhelming because of the heat wave. I invited Mrs. Rodriguez to stay in my guest room, and she accepted with quiet gratitude. The next afternoon, when I came home from work, my stomach dropped. Karen was standing in Mrs. Rodriguez's driveway, arguing with a locksmith who was in the middle of changing the garage door code. Mrs. Rodriguez stood nearby in the blistering heat, leaning heavily on her walker, her face red and strained. I parked crookedly and rushed over. "What is going on here?" Karen turned toward me with a smug, victorious smile. Mrs. Rodriguez failed to submit her quarterly maintenance inspection form. Under Bylaw 7, Section 12, the HOA is authorized to conduct emergency inspections and secure properties that are not in compliance. Mrs. Rodriguez's voice trembled. "I just forgot the paperwork, dear," she said weakly. "She won't let me back inside to get my medication." A cold fury settled in my chest. "It's 104 degrees. I snapped. She needs to get inside right now." Karen shrugged. "Rules are rules. She should have considered that before ignoring the bylaws." I turned to Locksmith, who looked deeply uncomfortable. "You realize you're participating in elder abuse, right? You're preventing an elderly woman from accessing medication and shelter during a heat emergency." He froze, keys still in his hand. "Ma'am, is that true? She needs medicine in there?" Karen waved him off. "She's exaggerating. You were hired by the HOA. Do your job." I'd already pulled out my phone. "I'm calling the police," I said flatly. "What you're doing is illegal imprisonment and elder endangerment." Karen scoffed, but I saw doubt flash across her face. "Don't be ridiculous. This is HOA business." The 911 operator answered, and I calmly explained everything. To his credit, the locksmith immediately handed the garage keys to Mrs. Rodriguez and began packing up. "I want no part of this," he muttered before leaving. Karen exploded. "You're interfering with official HOA enforcement," she screamed. "I'll fine you. I'll have you evicted. I'll put a lien on your house." I ignored her, helping Mrs. Rodriguez tour my home while keeping my phone recording. Karen followed us, her voice climbing into a shrill rant about lawsuits and penalties as we waited for the police. 15 minutes later, 2 cruisers pulled up. Karen instantly switched gears, adopting a sickly sweet tone as she explained there had been a misunderstanding during a routine inspection. The officers weren't buying it. After speaking with Mrs. Rodriguez, now safely inside my air-conditioned living room, drinking water, and reviewing the video I had recorded, they stepped outside to talk to Karen. I followed. One officer took notes while the other addressed her directly. "Ma'am, based on witness statements and video evidence, you are under arrest for elder endangerment and attempted unlawful imprisonment." Karen's face went completely pale. "What? That's absurd. I'm the HOA president. I was enforcing the rules." "HOA rules do not override state law," the officer replied calmly as he read her rights. "You knowingly prevented an elderly woman from accessing life-sustaining medication and shelter during a state-declared heat emergency." As they escorted her to the patrol car, neighbors emerged from their homes, standing silently on their lawns. Karen's protests echoed down the street. "This is a mistake. Do you know who I am? I'll sue every one of you." The fallout was immediate. Karen was booked on multiple charges and released on bail the next day. The story hit local news, complete with the video footage I provided. By the time an emergency HOA meeting was called the following week, Karen's reign was already over. The board voted unanimously to remove her as president. Several members openly apologized, admitting they had enabled her behavior for years out of fear or convenience. Karen sat in the back of the room while her attorney whispered urgently in her ear. Then came the final blow. The board announced that Karen would be personally responsible for all legal fees, as her actions were not authorized by the HOA and constituted individual misconduct. When the vote was finalized, Karen stood up slowly, disbelief etched across her face. "You can't do this to me," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I built this community. I protected property values." But as she looked around the room and saw only hardened faces filled with years of resentment, reality finally set in. Her shoulders sagged. For the first time since I'd known her, Karen Winters had nothing left to say. She walked out of the meeting with her attorney trailing behind her, the sharp click of her heels on the tile floor marking the end of her reign.